Part 1. The Frequency of God. I live in a world of absolute, heavy silence. I am completely deaf. I cannot hear the wind or the rain outside my window. But the noise never truly stops inside my mind. I constantly hear a loud, broken voice screaming in the dark. It is my own voice. My name is Vera. A few years ago, I was the most famous podcast producer in the world. I created a brilliant, powerful computer program called Siren AI. It was an advanced artificial intelligence. It could perfectly clone my voice and make it sound completely magical. I used the AI to change the low frequencies of my voice. I wanted my voice to physically stimulate the human brain. I wanted my listeners to feel an intense, addictive pleasure when they heard me speak. My crazy plan worked perfectly. Millions of people became totally addicted to my daily podcast. I felt like an untouchable god of sound. I was incredibly rich and famous. But I had one major problem in my perfect life. My husband, Owen, was a traditional audio engineer. He worked with old, physical sound equipment. He did not trust modern artificial intelligence at all. Owen told me my new AI technology was highly dangerous. He said human ears were fragile. He warned me that pushing sound frequencies too far could seriously damage the brain. I laughed at his serious face. I called him a jealous, old-fashioned fool. I completely ignored his desperate warnings. My podcast audience grew by 500% in a single month. The money poured into my bank accounts. But strange things started happening. I received hundreds of emails from angry listeners. They complained about sudden, severe headaches. Some people said their noses started bleeding after listening to my show. I deleted the emails immediately. I told my assistants the listeners were just experiencing strong emotional reactions to my beautiful stories. My arrogant pride completely blinded me to the truth. I refused to believe my perfect creation was causing any real physical pain. I was the queen of the digital world. One evening, Owen broke into my private office. He held a stack of printed audio charts. His hands were shaking violently. He showed me the dark, jagged lines on the paper. He proved that my AI voice was producing a deadly, invisible low frequency. It was reaching a fatal level of resonance. He begged me to stop the broadcast. He told me the sound waves were acting like a slow poison. I felt a sudden rush of pure, toxic anger. I thought he was trying to ruin my massive success. I snatched the papers from his hands and threw them directly into the trash can. I yelled at him to leave my office. I used my computer to lock him out of the main sound system. I proudly secured my digital empire. I thought I had silenced his jealous complaints forever. I did not know the real, bloody nightmare was just beginning to unfold in the dark. Part 2. The Midnight Saboteur. The next day was the most important day of my entire life. I planned to host a massive, global live broadcast using my Siren AI. Millions of people around the world were waiting to listen to my voice at the exact same time. The pressure and the excitement were absolutely incredible. Late at night, I could not sleep. I opened the security application on my mobile phone. I wanted to look at my beautiful, expensive server room. I expected to see a dark, empty space. Instead, my heart stopped completely. A dark figure was moving quickly between the tall computer towers. I zoomed in on the camera screen. It was my husband, Owen. He was standing directly in front of the main AI server. He was not supposed to be in that highly restricted room. I watched him push a small, silver USB drive into the main computer port. A bright red warning flashed on my phone screen. The security system told me someone was actively deleting the core AI audio files. He was trying to erase my beautiful, perfect voice. Pure, explosive anger consumed my mind. I grabbed my car keys and drove wildly toward the studio. I broke all the speed limits. I wanted to destroy the man who was ruining my dream. I arrived at the studio and ran down the dark hallway. I kicked the server room door open loudly. Owen jumped in surprise. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "What are you doing?" I screamed at the top of my lungs. I ran toward him and pulled the USB drive out of the computer. "You are trying to delete my work. You are a jealous, pathetic loser." I pushed him hard against the cold metal server rack. Owen did not try to explain himself. He did not argue or beg for forgiveness. He looked at the main server with desperate panic. He suddenly reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy pair of metal pliers. Before I could stop him, he grabbed the thick, main optical network cables. He squeezed the pliers and cut the expensive cables completely in half. The bright blue lights on the server instantly turned dark. He manually disconnected my AI system from the internet. I was completely shocked by his violent, sudden action. I raised my hand and slapped his face aggressively. I called the building security guards immediately. I told them my husband was a dangerous, crazy saboteur. I ordered them to drag him out of the server room. The guards grabbed his arms roughly. Owen looked back at me as they pulled him away. His face was full of profound sorrow. I stood alone in the dark server room. I looked at the cut cables on the floor. I believed he wanted to humiliate me in front of the whole world. I thought he was my greatest enemy. I was completely blind to the silent, desperate war he was fighting to save my soul. Part 3. The Arrogant Override. I sat in the dark server room, breathing heavily. The global live broadcast was scheduled to begin in exactly 1 hour. Millions of listeners were waiting online. But my main server was completely dead. Owen had cut the physical cables perfectly. The normal internet connection was totally destroyed. My assistants ran into the room, looking extremely panicked. They saw the cut wires and started crying. They told me we had to cancel the historic event immediately. They said it was technically impossible to fix the thick optical cables in time. My arrogant mind refused to accept defeat. "I am not canceling anything," I shouted confidently. "I will not let that jealous fool ruin my greatest moment." I pushed my assistants aside and sat down at the emergency computer terminal. I typed my ultimate administrative passwords into the system. I had one final, desperate option to save the show. I activated the secret, experimental backup satellite network. This secondary system bypassed the broken physical cables completely. It could beam my AI voice directly to the global internet using space satellites. My assistants begged me to stop. They warned me the backup system was never fully tested for a live event. I completely ignored their fearful voices. I typed the final override commands. The backup screens flashed bright green. The satellite connection was successfully established. But there was a massive, hidden danger I did not understand. The physical cables Owen cut were originally connected to his analog safety filters. Owen had secretly built those physical filters to control the dangerous low frequencies of my AI. By using the satellite backup, I completely bypassed his protective barriers. The artificial intelligence was now totally free. There were absolutely no safety limits left on my cloned voice. I smiled proudly at the green screens. I ordered my staff to leave the room and prepare for the countdown. I felt like a brilliant, unstoppable genius. I had defeated my husband's cruel sabotage. I walked toward the main recording studio, ready to speak to the entire world. I locked the thick door of my private booth. I put on my expensive headphones. The digital clock on the wall slowly counted down to 0. I did not know that Owen was still inside the building. He had escaped the security guards in the dark hallway. He knew exactly what I was doing. He knew I was too arrogant to cancel the show. He knew the backup system had no safety filters. Owen quietly sneaked into the master audio booth next to my room. He locked the heavy steel door from the inside. He was preparing for a nightmare. I looked at the microphone, completely unaware of the dark reality. The red live light turned on. I opened my mouth and began to speak my beautiful, toxic words. The artificial intelligence grabbed my voice, amplified it, and threw it up to the stars without any limits at all. Part 4: The Lethal Wave. The red light shined brightly in my quiet room. I spoke softly into the microphone. I told a beautiful, relaxing story. The artificial intelligence cloned my voice perfectly. It dropped the pitch to a deep, smooth frequency. The sound traveled up to the satellite and instantly reached millions of waiting smartphones. I looked at the live audience monitor on my computer screen. I expected to see the number of listeners rise rapidly. I expected to see thousands of happy comments and digital hearts. But the screen showed something completely different. The numbers were acting very strangely. Instead of rising, the connection numbers began to drop immediately. Thousands of people were disconnecting every single second. I frowned in confusion. I thought there was a simple network error. Then, the live video feeds from the audience started to pop up on my secondary monitor. The images were absolutely horrifying. I saw a young woman sitting in her bedroom, wearing headphones. Suddenly, she screamed and grabbed her ears. She fell to the floor, shaking violently. Dark red blood poured quickly from her nose and her ears. She passed out in front of the camera. I watched another video. A man driving his car suddenly covered his head in pain. His car crashed loudly into a wall. The global internet exploded with pure terror. Millions of people were collapsing. My beautiful, perfect AI voice was acting like a powerful, invisible sonic weapon. The unfiltered low frequencies were causing a fatal acoustic resonance inside the human skull. It was physically tearing their eardrums apart and causing severe internal bleeding. I was hurting millions of innocent people. Panic completely paralyzed my body. I stopped speaking immediately, but it did not help. The artificial intelligence had taken over. The program continued to broadcast the dangerous, lethal frequency on a continuous loop. I grabbed my computer mouse and tried to click the emergency stop button. A red error message flashed on the screen. Access denied. Administrator override locked. I had locked the system myself to prevent Owen from stopping me. I had removed my own ability to cancel the broadcast. I was trapped inside my own perfect design. I screamed and hit the keyboard violently. I had to pull the main power plug to stop the massacre. Suddenly, the thick, reinforced glass window of my recording booth began to vibrate wildly. A loud, terrible humming noise filled the air. The sound waves were so powerful they were affecting the physical room. Tiny cracks appeared in the strong glass. The entire building shook with the deadly, invisible force. I fell to the floor, covering my ears in pure terror. I was watching my dream turn into a global catastrophe. I had created a monster that I could no longer control. The screaming voices on the internet echoed in my mind. I was a mass murderer, and I could not stop the killing. Part 5. The Cowardly Accusation. The terrifying sound suddenly stopped. The bright lights in the studio flickered and died. The computer screens turned completely black. The massive broadcast was finally terminated. A heavy, unnatural silence fell over the dark building. I sat on the floor, shaking violently, covered in cold sweat. Loud sirens wailed outside the studio. Heavy boots ran down the hallway. The police and emergency medical teams burst through the doors. They found me crying in the dark. A stern police officer pulled me to my feet. He told me thousands of people were hospitalized across the city. The officers started searching the dark building for the cause of the disaster. They reached the master audio booth. The heavy steel door was locked from the inside. The police used a heavy metal ram to break the door open. I followed them, my heart beating incredibly fast. I looked inside the broken room. The sight was absolutely horrific. Owen was lying on the floor, completely unconscious. His face was covered in dark red blood. The blood was leaking heavily from his eyes, his nose, and his ears. The massive sound equipment in the room was completely burned and destroyed. The paramedics rushed forward and put an oxygen mask on his bloody face. They carried him away on a stretcher. A detective turned to me, his eyes full of deep suspicion. He asked me what happened in that room. He asked me why my husband was covered in blood. I was terrified. I realized I was facing a lifetime in federal prison for global terrorism. I needed a way to save my own life. I made the most disgusting, cowardly decision a human being could ever make. I decided to blame the disaster entirely on my broken husband. I pulled my mobile phone from my pocket. I showed the detective the security video from the server room. I showed him the footage of Owen plugging in the USB drive and cutting the thick optical cables. I pointed a shaking finger at the video screen. He did it. I lied, my voice sounding weak and pathetic. He is a jealous, crazy man. He planted a deadly virus in my system with that USB drive. He cut the cables to trap me. He caused the lethal sound wave to hurt my listeners. He is a terrorist. The detective watched the video carefully. He saw the cut wires and nodded his head slowly. The evidence looked completely real. I told the detective that Owen must have hurt himself accidentally while trying to destroy the master booth. I painted him as a monster who failed his own evil plan. The police believed my terrible lie. They officially named Owen as the primary suspect in the global sonic attack. I walked out of the dark studio, feeling a sick sense of relief. I had sacrificed my innocent husband to save my own skin. I thought my lies would protect me forever. Part 6. The Demonic Algorithm. I was released on bail while the police continued their investigation. I hid inside my large, silent house, watching the terrible news on television. The world hated Owen. They called him a crazy, jealous terrorist. I drank a glass of wine, trying to forget the heavy guilt in my chest. 2 weeks later, the police asked me to return to the station. A special team of independent digital forensic experts had analyzed my broken server. I walked into the bright meeting room, feeling confident. I believed my fake story was completely safe. I sat down across from a serious, older woman. She was the lead digital investigator. She placed a thick, yellow folder on the table. We analyzed the silver USB drive your husband plugged into the server, she said coldly. We examined the code he tried to upload. I crossed my arms and waited for her to confirm my lie. The USB drive did not contain a virus, Vera, she stated firmly, staring directly into my eyes. It did not contain any malicious software. The code on that drive was a sophisticated kill switch. It was an emergency program designed to safely delete all artificial intelligence audio files. My confident smile vanished instantly. What do you mean? I whispered, my mouth feeling incredibly dry. The investigator opened the folder. Your husband was trying to erase the system to save those people, she explained. He knew a disaster was coming. He was trying to stop the broadcast completely. If he didn't plant a virus, then what caused the lethal sound wave? I demanded, my voice shaking with sudden fear. The investigator pulled out a complex page of computer code. She pointed a red pen at a specific line of text. The source of the disaster was hidden right here. This is your original algorithm, Vera, she said quietly. You wrote this code to manipulate the low frequencies of your voice. But you made a massive, fatal mathematical error in the base programming. Your code naturally created a deadly infrasound resonance. It was essentially a digital weapon. The horrific truth hit my brain like a physical punch. Owen was completely right. My perfect creation was flawed from the very beginning. But there was one more terrible detail. Why didn't it hurt people during the testing phase? I cried softly. The investigator sighed heavily. Because your husband built physical, analog safety filters to block your dangerous frequency, she answered grimly. He protected you for months. But when you bypassed his cut cables and used the satellite backup, you removed his filters. You released your own demonic algorithm into the world. I was the killer. My arrogance and my bad code caused the mass injury. Owen tried to delete my mistake to save lives, and I stopped him. I slapped him and called the police. I was the monster I had accused him of being. The weight of the truth completely crushed my soul. Part 7. The Soundproof Booth. I sat in the police station, crying uncontrollably. The investigator watched me with pure disgust. If my code caused the disaster, how did the broadcast finally stop? I sobbed desperately. Why did the system crash? And why was Owen bleeding in the master booth? The investigator pushed a small laptop across the table. We recovered the hidden security camera footage from inside the master audio booth, she said softly. You need to see exactly what your husband did after you locked him out of the main system. I pressed the play button with trembling fingers. The video was completely silent. It showed Owen standing alone inside the small, heavily soundproofed room. He looked at the computer screen on the wall. He saw that I had successfully activated the satellite backup network. Owen knew he could not stop the software anymore. I had locked the administrative controls completely. He realized the deadly sound wave was going to reach millions of innocent people in a few seconds. He had only one desperate option left. He had to physically destroy the hardware. He needed to break the massive, main amplifier that powered the entire studio. But he had no tools and no weapons in the room. He looked around frantically. Then he looked at the large, heavy studio headphones on the desk. He looked at the powerful, live recording microphone. I watched him make a brilliant, terrifying, and completely suicidal decision. He picked up the heavy headphones and put them tightly over his ears. He reached for the main analog mixing board. He turned the master volume dials all the way up to the maximum, dangerous limit. Then he grabbed the live microphone. He did not speak into it. Instead, he pressed the top of the microphone directly against the side of his headphones. I gasped in absolute horror. I suddenly understood exactly what he was trying to do. It was a basic rule of audio engineering. When a live microphone gets too close to a speaker, it creates a loud, screaming noise. It is called an acoustic feedback loop. The sound goes into the microphone, out of the speaker, and back into the microphone again. The volume multiplies instantly, creating a massive spike in energy. Owen deliberately created an acoustic feedback loop at maximum volume. But he did not just hold the microphone near a regular speaker. He used his own physical skull as a sealed acoustic chamber. By pressing the microphone against the headphones on his head, he trapped the sound wave completely. He trapped the massively multiplying energy directly inside his own brain. He forced the sound to bounce back and forth through his skull thousands of times per second. He was using his own head to build a sonic bomb to overload the main amplifier. He was executing himself. Part 8. The Flesh Buffer. I stared at the laptop screen, completely paralyzed by fear and sorrow. The video showed the exact moment the acoustic feedback loop reached its maximum, terrifying power. Owen's entire body went completely rigid. He fell to his knees on the floor of the soundproof booth. The invisible, compressed sound wave was crushing his brain with unimaginable physical force. It was like a bomb exploding repeatedly inside his head. The pressure was absolutely monstrous. I watched the dark red blood burst suddenly from his nose and his ears. The blood ran down his pale face, staining his shirt. His eyes widened in pure, agonizing torture. Blood began to leak from his tear ducts, turning his eyes completely red. The pain must have been absolute hell. Any normal person would have dropped the microphone instantly to stop the suffering. But Owen did not drop the microphone. He gripped the metal handle with both hands, his knuckles turning totally white. He pressed the microphone even harder against his headphones. He refused to let the sound wave escape. He kept the deadly loop perfectly sealed inside his own skull. He forced his dying brain to act as a human flesh buffer. He absorbed the massive, destructive energy of the runaway sound system entirely into himself. He held the screaming loop together while the main amplifiers outside the room began to overheat from the impossible power surge. I watched him suffer for 10 long, agonizing seconds. He was violently shaking, bleeding heavily onto the floor. But he held the trap perfectly. Finally, the massive amplifiers could not handle the feedback loop anymore. The main power system overloaded completely. Sparks flew from the walls. The entire studio system blew out in a violent electrical crash. The broadcast was instantly and permanently terminated. The red live light turned dark. Owen's body immediately went limp. He collapsed sideways onto the floor, dropping the bloody microphone. He did not move again. He successfully killed the broadcast before the deadly AI frequency could reach hundreds of millions of other waiting listeners. He sacrificed his own brain to stop the monster I had created. He saved the world in absolute, agonizing silence. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. I vomited into a small trash can in the corner of the police room. The crushing guilt was heavier than a mountain. I had called him a coward. I had called him a terrorist. But he was the bravest, most incredible hero in history. He loved me enough to clean up my toxic, bloody mess with his own life. He took the punishment that I completely deserved. I wiped my mouth and looked at the investigator with dead, empty eyes. "Where is he?" I whispered. "I need to see my husband right now." Part 9. The Silent Death Sentence. The police escorted me to the secure hospital located inside the state prison. I walked down the bright, white hallways, my legs feeling like heavy lead. We reached the intensive care unit. A quiet doctor led me into a small, sterile room filled with loud medical machines. Owen was lying on a white bed. His head was wrapped in thick, white bandages. A large plastic breathing tube was pushed down his throat. The machines beeped rhythmically, pushing air into his lungs. He looked incredibly small and perfectly still. I walked slowly to the edge of his bed. I gently touched his cold hand. "I am here, Owen," I whispered, crying soft, bitter tears. "I know the truth now. I am so sorry. Please wake up. I will fix everything. I will tell the world you are a hero. Just open your eyes." The doctor walked to my side and sighed heavily. "He will not wake up, Vera," the doctor said with a gentle, sad voice. The acoustic shockwave was far too powerful. The compressed sound physically crushed his frontal lobe and caused massive, irreversible internal bleeding in his brain. "He is completely brain dead," the doctor explained. "The machines are the only things keeping his heart beating. There is absolutely no hope for recovery. The man you knew is already gone." The words shattered my heart completely. My arrogant dream had literally killed the man I loved. A police detective walked into the hospital room. He held a clear plastic evidence bag. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and anger. "We found something else in the master audio booth," the detective said quietly. We took a photograph of the analog mixing board. He handed me the photograph. I looked closely at the image. The heavy metal surface of the mixing board was smeared with dark red blood. In his final, agonizing seconds of consciousness, before his brain completely died, Owen had used his bloody finger to write a message. For simple, messy words were written in blood across the metal board. "I turned it off for you." I stared at the photo, completely devastated by the unexpected twist. He did not write a message to save his own reputation. He did not write a message blaming me for the disaster. He used his last thought on Earth to protect me. He knew the police would find the room. He knew I would face life in prison for the massacre. He intentionally left a message claiming responsibility for turning the system off, embracing the role of the saboteur to hide my massive mistake. He accepted the blame completely. He died playing the villain, so I would not be remembered as the greatest mass murderer in history. He gave me his life, his reputation, and his final drop of blood. I fell to the floor, screaming his name into the cold, sterile air. Part 10. The Static of Conscience. The truth eventually reached the public, but the full story was complicated. The police cleared me of all terrorism charges because they realized the AI frequency was a tragic programming error, not an intentional weapon. However, I lost all my money in massive civil lawsuits. My career was completely, permanently destroyed. 1 month later, The doctors officially unplugged Owen's life support machines. I stood by his bed and watched him slip away peacefully. I held his cold hand, wishing I could trade my miserable life for his. But the universe had a very different, much darker punishment prepared for my arrogant soul. I attended my final court hearing to finalize the bankruptcy of my company. I stood before the judge in a large, quiet room. The judge raised his heavy wooden gavel and hit the desk to close the case. I saw the wooden hammer strike the wood, but a strange, terrifying thing happened. I did not hear the loud crack of the hammer. I frowned in confusion. I looked at my lawyer. He was speaking to me, but his lips were moving in total silence. Panic rushed through my body. The delayed trauma of standing near the vibrating glass of the recording booth had finally taken its toll. The powerful sound waves from that night had slowly, irreparably destroyed the delicate nerves deep inside my ears. I was completely, permanently deaf. I lost the ability to hear music, laughter, or the simple sound of rain. The famous podcast queen was banished to a world of total silence. Many long years have passed since that day. I live completely alone in a small, empty house near the ocean. I have no friends and no visitors. The absolute silence of the world is a fitting punishment for my crimes. But the silence is not my true torture. The true horror of my existence comes from inside my own damaged brain. The ruined nerves in my ears suffer from severe, incurable tinnitus. It is a constant, auditory hallucination that I cannot escape. I never experience true, peaceful quiet. I am forced to listen to a phantom noise every single day. But I do not hear a simple ringing sound. My broken brain produces a very specific, twisted hallucination. I constantly hear the distorted, broken static of my own artificial intelligence voice. It sounds like a demonic radio playing my arrogant podcast on an endless, looping nightmare. I sit in my chair, staring out at the gray ocean. The buzzing, broken voice screams in my head. It reminds me of the pain I caused. It reminds me of the brilliant, loving man who died to stop it. I am trapped in a prison of my own design, listening forever to the ghost of my own terrible pride.